The desert world of Soluin burned beneath twin suns, its horizon fractured by jagged ruins that shimmered in the heat. Captain Elias Ward trudged through the wreckage of a battlefield long since abandoned by both sides, his boots sinking into dust that smelled faintly of ozone and blood. The war had ended weeks ago, or at least his part in it had, but silence was never safe out here. The sand still held secrets, and sometimes it whispered them. His uniform was torn, his medkit nearly empty, and his water ration lower than his patience. He had only one goal left: survive long enough to find a functioning beacon. That was when he heard it, a sound so faint it barely cut through the wind. A voice, low and hoarse, half human, half something else. Elias froze, hand on his sidearm, scanning the ruins. The sound came again, closer this time, a shallow, ragged breath. He followed it cautiously, rounding the base of a collapsed structure. What he saw stopped him cold. A figure lay sprawled among the wreckage, armor shattered, its metallic sheen dulled by sand and blood. At first, he thought she was human, her shape, her face. But the faint glow beneath her skin told another story. Her veins pulsed with silver light. Her eyes, half open, reflected the sun's in eerie patterns. She was tall, impossibly so, her form both graceful and alien. He knelt beside her, training overriding fear. "Hey," he said quietly, "you're still breathing. Hold on." She stirred, a faint tremor in her chest. "Don't touch me," she rasped. Her voice carried authority even now, as if the air itself obeyed. He ignored her. "Sorry, but I'm not in the mood to watch someone die today." He unsealed his medkit, scanning the strange armor. The wounds were deep, some kind of plasma burn cutting across her abdomen, through layers of biometal and flesh. The design of her suit was unlike anything Terran engineers had made, organic, grown rather than forged. As he pried it open carefully, she hissed, her hand darting up to grab his wrist. Her grip was strong, inhumanly so, but weak from blood loss. "You dare touch the blood of—" She stopped, wincing. "Yeah," Elias muttered. "I dare. You want to keep arguing? Or you want to live?" Her glare could have melted steel. But when he applied the sealant foam, she gasped instead, eyes wide as the nanogel shimmered into her wound, stabilizing it. Her body reacted violently. The glow in her veins flickered erratically, light pulsing through her armor like a broken circuit. Elias leaned back, watching in alarm. "What the hell?" She clenched her teeth, voice strained. "Your medicine. It's foreign. It's human," he said. "You're lucky it works on you at all." "Lucky?" she repeated bitterly, closing her eyes. Such an inefficient word. "Yeah, well, it keeps us alive." He wiped sweat from his brow, adjusting the dosage. The air around them smelled of ozone again, and faint vibrations rippled through the ground. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, though the sky was clear. He glanced at the horizon uneasily. "We should move," he said. "You can walk. I can command worlds," she murmured, eyes fluttering shut. "Walking should be possible." She collapsed before she could prove it. Elias sighed. "Figures." He slung her arm over his shoulder, surprised by how heavy she was despite her frame. Her armor felt alive, pulsing faintly, warm against his neck. Step by step, he carried her toward the shelter of an old transport hull. Once inside, he lowered her onto a pile of sandbags, brushing dust from her hair. Up close, she looked less terrifying and more haunting. Her face was human enough to make him hesitate, but the faint luminescence beneath her skin marked her as something beyond. He wrapped her side in bandages, sterilized the burns, and set up a small field for her. She didn't stir again, though her breathing steadied. He sat beside her, exhausted, staring at the dim light seeping through the cracks. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm babysitting an alien." When she woke hours later, it was to the sound of metal being struck, a faint rhythm almost musical. She blinked, disoriented, watching the human tinkering with a salvaged drone near the firelight. His hands were scarred but precise, his expression calm. For a moment, She only observed him. His movements were deliberate, efficient, unhurried. It was strange. Most beings would have fled or tried to capture her. He hadn't even asked her name. "You are not afraid," she said finally. He looked up, startled. "You're awake. And yeah, fear takes energy. I'm short on that." She studied him. "You know what I am. An injured stranger," he said simply. "That's enough for now." She frowned, unused to simplicity. "You don't recognize the markings on my armor?" "Lady, I barely recognize my own uniform at this point." Something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, or maybe confusion. "You are peculiar." "You're welcome," he said, checking her vitals. "Your blood pressure's stabilizing. You healed me." "Yeah, you're welcome for that too. You shouldn't have." "You're not the first person to say that." He leaned back, sighing. "What were you doing out here?" Her gaze drifted to the broken horizon. "I was betrayed," she said simply. "My ship destroyed. My soldiers scattered." "War?" he asked. "Conquest," she corrected. "My empire spans 11 systems. My enemies number in thousands." He chuckled softly. "Guess I picked up the wrong stranger." "You have no idea," she murmured. The silence between them thickened, filled only by the crackle of the fire. Elias studied her carefully. "You got a name? Or should I keep calling you Your Majesty?" Her eyes flickered. "You mock royalty?" "Only when they bleed like everyone else." That earned him a sharp look, but not anger, something like intrigue. "I am Lysara of the Salenthi Dominion," she said at last, voice quiet but firm. "High Sovereign of the 9 Thrones." "That's a mouthful," he said. "I'll stick with Lysara." Her lips twitched, just slightly. "You're bold for someone beneath the stars." "You're welcome again." He tossed her a small ration pack. "Eat. You'll heal faster." Hours turned to days. The storms came and went, and together they scavenged through wreckage for supplies. Elias learned her ways, the rhythm of her speech, the way her eyes tracked every motion with predatory grace. She learned his stubbornness, the way he fixed broken things, the way he smiled even when it hurt. He told her about Earth, about oceans and rain and the smell of wet soil after storms. She listened quietly, her gaze distant. "Your world sounds fragile," she said once. "It is," he replied. "That's what makes it worth saving." She didn't respond, but that night, he noticed her staring at the stars for a long time. By the 3rd week, she could walk again, though still unsteady. Elias helped her train, guiding her through stretches and balance drills among the dunes. "You are patient," she said one evening. "Most would have demanded reward or allegiance by now." "I'm not most," he said, "and I'm not in it for payment." "Then why?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Because someone has to do the right thing, even when it's stupid." She tilted her head, as if tasting the concept. "Stupid?" she repeated softly. "A uniquely human virtue. We have a lot of those." "So it seems," she said. "And yet your kind survives." When the first of her soldiers arrived, a squad of tall, armored figures descending through the dust, Elias knew their time was up. The ground shook as the dropship landed, scattering sand and flame. Lysara stood straighter, her expression unreadable. The soldiers knelt immediately. "My queen," their leader said. "We feared you lost." "I was," she said quietly. "But I was found." Their eyes flicked to Elias. One reached for a weapon, but she raised a hand. "No, he stays." The soldier hesitated. "Your Majesty, he's human. And he saved your queen's life," she said coldly. "Show respect." The warrior bowed his head. "As you command." Elias glanced at her. "Guess that makes it official." "What does?" "You being the boss of everyone." "I always was," she said. "But now, perhaps I understand what that means." She turned toward him, her voice lowering. "When I ruled before, I commanded through fear, through perfection. But you," she paused, searching his face, "you healed me without condition. That is power of another kind." He met her gaze steadily. You don't owe me anything. No, she said. But my people do. The suns sank behind the dunes, turning the sky gold and crimson. The wind carried the sound of approaching engines. The fleet had come to reclaim its queen. She looked back at him, her expression softening. You should come, she said. You would be honored among my kind. I don't think your empire's ready for a mechanic from Earth. Perhaps, she said. But I am not ready to forget. She reached out, placing a hand on his chest. The contact was warm, alive. If ever you call my name among the stars, she said, I will hear you. I'll hold you to that, he said softly. When the dropship's light swallowed her, Elias stood alone in the desert, watching until she was gone. The wind picked up again, scattering dust around his boots. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. Deadliest army in the galaxy, he muttered, and I gave their leader a second chance. He looked toward the rising suns, their light sharp and bright. You're welcome, Lysara. The wind over Soluan's desert was a whisper now instead of a roar. The war had moved beyond this world, and what remained was silence and sand. Elias watched the departing fleet until the last glimmer of its silver hulls disappeared into the sky, leaving only heat haze and the faint hum of memory. He stood there long after, the wind tugging at his jacket, until the horizon blurred. For the first time in months, he was truly alone again. The camp was empty. No more firelight, no voice beside him telling him how illogical human emotions were. He chuckled softly, rubbing his temples. Guess you're not coming back, huh? He murmured. His voice carried into the emptiness and dissolved. He told himself that was fine. She had an empire. He had dust. Days turned to weeks as he scavenged what little remained of the crash sites. The old transport hull had become his home, patched with scrap plating and sun-bleached tarps. He repaired drones, traded components with passing scavengers, and waited for a Terran patrol that never came. Nights were the hardest. The stars above Soluan were unnaturally bright, sharp like fragments of glass. Sometimes, when the wind blew a certain way, he thought he heard her voice again. Soft, commanding, distant. You are patient, it would whisper, and he would mutter back, not patient, just stubborn. He didn't know why he talked to the wind. Maybe because no one else would answer. Then one night the sky tore open. The horizon flashed white, and thunder rolled through the desert like the voice of a god. Elias bolted upright from his cot, stepping outside to see what looked like a meteor storm burning through the atmosphere. But these weren't meteors, they moved in formation. Dozens of craft descending fast, streaking fire across the night. His breath caught as the largest one broke through the clouds. A massive warship, unmistakably Salenthi design. The air shimmered around it as if space itself bent to its will. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, he muttered. The ship slowed, hovering directly over the plateau above his camp. Engines screamed, sand spiraled, and then, silence. A beam of golden light struck the ground. Elias squinted against the glare as figures stepped through, tall, armored silhouettes moving with machine-like precision. They formed a semicircle before the light faded, revealing a single unarmored figure at their center. He knew that walk, that posture, that gaze. Lysara, he breathed. She approached, her armor gleaming faintly beneath the twin moons, every step deliberate, regal. The last time he'd seen her, she'd looked fragile, human even. Now she radiated power. Yet when she stopped before him, something in her eyes softened. You look surprised, she said. You said you'd hear me if I called, he said. Didn't think you'd bring the whole army with you. They insisted, she replied dryly. Apparently, the galaxy does not pause while I recover. He crossed his arms, feigning nonchalance. So what's the occasion? Lost another war. Her eyes glinted. A civil one. That made him pause. You're kidding. Do I look as though I jest? She said quietly. While I was gone, factions rose within my dominion. My generals fought over control. Some believed me dead. Others worshipped the idea of me instead. She stepped closer, the air between them charged. They have forgotten what I am, what I became. Elias studied her. So why come to me? Because you remind me of what I am not. He frowned. I'm not sure I follow. You will, she said softly. She turned, gesturing to one of her soldiers. The warrior produced a device, a small crystalline sphere that hovered in midair, projected an image of stars, scattered with red markings. These are the systems under rebellion. Their leaders seek to restore the old ways, perfection through obedience, life without emotion. Her gaze flicked to him. They call themselves the Pure Legion. Elias snorted. Sounds charming. They are efficient, she said darkly, and merciless. They purge worlds to preserve control. And you can't stop them? I can, she said. But not as I am. He raised an eyebrow. You're still the queen of 11 systems. A queen divided is no ruler, she said. My people see my humanity as weakness. To them, my transformation is corruption. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then why not prove them wrong? Because they are right, she said quietly. The words startled him. Excuse me, I am weakened, she said. Your blood saved me, but it changed me. I no longer think as they do. I no longer see as they see. When I command now, I hesitate. That's called conscience, he said. We call that a feature. My kind call it a defect, she said. And they will destroy me for it. For a moment, the only sound was the desert wind. Then Elias asked, So what do you need from me? Lysara's expression softened. Guidance, she said. Perspective. I need to understand what drives a species that thrives on imperfection. You're asking me to teach you how to be human? Not human, she said. Alive. He stared at her, trying to decide if she was serious. But the look in her eyes told him she was. Lysara, he said finally. You're trying to fight an empire that thinks you're too human by hanging out with a human. That's not exactly subtle. Subtlety was never my weapon, she replied. He sighed. Fine. But if I'm doing this, we do it my way. Meaning, no soldiers, no titles, no your majesty, just you and me. She tilted her head, intrigued. You make demands of a queen. Guess I do. And if I refuse? Then you're wasting your time here. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then a slow smile curved her lips. Very well, Elias Ward. For now, I will obey. He smirked. There's a first. They spent the next weeks traveling across the fringe worlds of her empire. Places scarred by war, cities where the walls still bore the mark of her armies. Elias taught her how to walk among her people without being feared, how to listen instead of command. It was awkward at first. She treated conversation like strategy, every question a battle to be won. But slowly something shifted. He saw it in the way she paused before answering a child's question, or how she lingered when hearing laughter in the streets. They look at me differently now, she said one night as they watched the sunset from the edge of a ruined citadel. Not as a queen, not as a god, as something else. Someone else, he corrected. She glanced at him. Is there truly a difference? All the difference in the world, he said. But change has a way of drawing fire. Word spread quickly that the Queen of the Nine Thrones had abandoned purity. The Pure Legion began their crusade, sweeping across her loyal territories like wildfire. Whole fleets vanished. Her generals defected. And through it all, Elias stayed by her side. He watched her command fleets with calm precision but also with something new, restraint. You're holding back, he said once. You could crush them. And become what they believe I am? She replied. No, there must be another way. There isn't always, he said. Sometimes mercy gets people killed. Then we die differently, she said. When the Legion finally came for her directly, it was on the world of Ithis Prime, a world of glass deserts and violet storms. The battle lasted 2 days. When the dust settled, the Queen's fleet was broken, and her ship burned in the sky. Elias dragged her from the wreckage, smoke thick in the air. You're bleeding again, he said, pressing his hand to her side. How poetic, she murmured weakly. You began our story like this. Don't talk, he said. Save your strength. She laughed softly, even as blood slicked her armor. Strength is overrated. You're impossible, he muttered. So you've told me, she whispered, eyes dimming. He managed to stabilize her in the ruins of an old observatory overlooking the battlefield. The sky burned with falling debris, casting orange light through the shattered glass. She stirred after hours, her voice faint. They will come again. Then we'll run, he said. No, she said. You'll run. He frowned. Not a chance. Elias, don't start with the noble sacrifice thing. You're not dying today. Her lips curved faintly. You speak as though you command me. Maybe I do, he said softly. At least when it comes to surviving. Her laughter was weak but real. You never learned to fear me. I learned to know you, he said. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that wasn't command or pride. It was wonder. Your kind fights for reasons I cannot fathom, she said. Not for conquest, not even for victory, but for meaning, even when it destroys you. That's humanity for you, he said. Stupid, messy, relentless. And beautiful, she whispered. The sound of engines echoed in the distance. More Legion craft, closing fast. Elias gritted his teeth. We need to move. You need to live, she said. If I fall, let me fall as the queen they feared, not the woman you taught. No, he said fiercely. You fall as both. She blinked, caught off guard. Both? Yeah, he said. Because that's what you are now. She stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. Then perhaps, there is hope. The first wave hit before dawn. The ruins lit up with plasma fire, and the ground shook. Elias fought beside her, using every scrap of human ingenuity he had. Mines rigged from fuel cells, turrets made from salvage, a dozen desperate tricks. The Legion came in endless waves, their chant echoing through the valley. Purity through fire. But the fire met steel and heart. Lasara stood in the storm, eyes blazing, her armor fractured but unbroken. She fought not as a queen commanding legions, but as a woman who had learned to care. When the last of the Legion fell, dawn broke red over the horizon. The silence that followed felt eternal. Elias staggered to her side, breath ragged. She was standing, barely, her blade cracked, her armor scorched. It's over, he said. She looked to the sky where the smoke cleared, revealing the faint glow of the twin suns. No, she said softly. It's just beginning. The aftermath of the battle left Ithis Prime scarred. Jagged pillars of molten rock jutting into the sky, and the air thick with ash and ozone. Elias helped Lasara down a ruined stairway from her flagship, her breathing heavy but measured. Each step she took required effort, yet she refused to lean on him, her dignity unyielding. You should let me help you, he said, steadying her arm. I can walk, she replied quietly, her voice tight with pain but firm. And yet, you brought me here first. He gave a slight shrug. I guess old habits die hard. She allowed herself the smallest of smiles, a brief flash of something almost human, before her eyes hardened. We have to rebuild, faster than they think. And if they come again? He asked. Then we make sure they don't. The city was in ruins, the streets littered with debris and smoldering vehicles. Elias moved alongside Lasara, taking stock of the damage. The survivors, both human and alien, looked to her with awe and fear. Whispers of her presence spread like wildfire, carrying tales of a queen who had fallen, who had been saved by a human. She ignored the stares, her mind already calculating, planning, strategizing. Elias knew that look. It was the same one she had when commanding fleets, when making impossible decisions that decided countless lives. And yet, there was something else now, restraint, compassion, subtle but unmistakable. You've changed, he said softly. Yes, she replied, not looking at him. But perhaps the galaxy will be stronger for it. They entered the remains of her command hall, the central chamber reduced to shards of crystal and twisted steel. Lasara knelt briefly to inspect the panels, tapping on broken consoles that sparked under her fingers. "Communication arrays are offline," she muttered. Elias crouched beside her. "Then how do you plan to rally your people?" She stood straight, her posture regaining authority. "Not through fear. Through example." He raised an eyebrow. "That's new." She didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the chamber, noting where civilians could be sheltered, where defenses could be erected. Elias realized she had already begun the meticulous work of leadership again, but this time tempered with humanity. Outside, the twin suns cast long shadows across the city. Elias helped secure temporary shelters, coordinating supplies with her remaining loyalists. He marveled at her adaptability, how quickly she had shifted from warrior to strategist to caretaker. "You make this look easy," he said one evening as they patched a collapsed structure. "Do I?" she asked, focused on aligning a support beam. "Yes," he replied, "even when it's not." She looked at him then, and for the first time he felt the weight of her gaze. It was not command, nor intimidation, it was recognition. He swallowed, feeling the faintest spark of pride. "It doesn't feel easy," she said softly, returning her attention to the work. As nights passed, Elias began teaching her the subtleties of human interaction, of negotiation and patience, things that her empire's rigid hierarchy had never allowed. They sat together on the edge of the rebuilt plaza, watching the stars reflect off pools of molten glass. "Your kind values imperfection," she said. "Why?" "Because it makes you adaptable," he explained. "It keeps you alive when the rules fail." She considered this, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. "Adaptable," she repeated. "Yes, I can see the merit. And dangerous. But useful." He smiled faintly. "Dangerous is sometimes necessary." She glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "And yet you've taught me mercy. And it saved your life," he reminded her. Weeks became months. Elias and Lasara moved among the settlements, rebuilding infrastructure, mentoring leaders, and quelling small rebellions before they could spread. Her aura had shifted. Soldiers no longer flinched at her gaze. Civilians no longer bowed out of fear. Elias noticed how children approached her freely, mimicking her stance or asking questions. Once, a child offered her a piece of bread, and she accepted it with a smile, something Elias had never expected. "You are changing the empire," he said softly one evening. She sat beside him on a rooftop, overlooking the city as the twin suns set. "Or perhaps I am," she said. "The line between ruler and servant has blurred." "Sounds complicated," he said. "It is," she admitted. The first significant threat came unexpectedly. Scouts reported a fleet on approach, not Salenthi, but a coalition of neighboring systems sensing weakness in her diminished state. Lasara and Elias reviewed the plans together, her strategy methodical, her movements precise. "You've changed the way you fight," he observed. "I fight for survival, not fear," she corrected. "Efficiency is no longer my only metric. Now I consider cost, not just victory." He nodded, understanding her shift. "You're becoming a legend," he said quietly. "Perhaps," she replied. "But legends are fragile. Stories can crumble. Actions endure." The ensuing battle was unlike any Elias had witnessed. Lasara's forces moved with uncanny precision, guided by her intuition and tempered with the humanity Elias had taught her. The coalition underestimated her restraint, expecting brutality, but she struck with calculated force, neutralizing threats without unnecessary loss. Elias tended to wounded soldiers on the field, his heart swelling with pride and fear. When Lasara fought alongside him, her strikes were fierce but measured, each one precise, conserving life where possible. He realized she had fully internalized the lessons of mercy, patience, and adaptability, merging them seamlessly with her innate power. After the battle, the city stood, scarred but unbroken. Lasara surveyed the aftermath, her chest rising and falling slowly. Elias approached, handing her a simple ration. "You could have crushed them," he said. And yet, you didn't. She accepted it, nodding faintly. Power is hollow without restraint, she replied. He smiled faintly. Good to see the queen talking philosophy. She glanced at him, lips twitching. I learned from a human philosopher. That's me, he said. Modesty is my virtue. Stubbornness, she corrected. Same thing, he said, shaking his head. Over the next several weeks, Elias and Lasara traveled between worlds, restoring order, teaching restraint, and building alliances. Elias observed the subtle ways in which she inspired loyalty. Her soldiers now followed her not from fear, but from respect. Her empire began to shift, slowly transforming under the influence of her new leadership. And throughout it all, she remained attentive to him, listening, questioning, even seeking advice. A far cry from the solitary, fearsome queen he had first encountered. One night, on the surface of a newly reclaimed planet, Elias found himself watching Lasara from a distance. She stood atop a hill, looking out over the settlements, her armor glinting in the moonlight. He felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. You've done something remarkable, he said softly. She turned, her golden eyes meeting his. I am learning, she said quietly. From you. He walked closer. Then perhaps the galaxy is learning too, he said. She inclined her head, a faint smile playing across her lips. It is. The months rolled on, and the bond between human and queen deepened. Elias realized that she trusted him not only with her life but with her vision for the future, and that realization weighed heavily on him. He was no longer merely a healer or advisor. He was a witness to transformation, an anchor in the storm of empire. One evening, as they rested on a cliff overlooking a molten river, she spoke softly. Do you ever fear the weight of what you carry? Every day, he admitted. Yet I endure. She looked at him intently. You teach me endurance, human, perhaps more than I ever taught my own kind. It was during this time that whispers began to circulate across the empire. Rumors of a human influencing the Queen of the Nine Thrones reached distant stars. Some feared the corruption of her humanity. Others marveled at the mercy instilled in her by one so small, so fragile in comparison. Elias tried not to concern himself with the gossip, focusing instead on rebuilding, on guiding, and on ensuring that Lasara's empire would survive the turbulence of change. The turning point came when a coalition of worlds, still loyal to the Pure Legion, launched a coordinated assault across several systems simultaneously. Lasara and Elias had anticipated some resistance, but not the scale. The battle unfolded across star systems, each planet a chessboard of strategy and survival. Elias found himself in the thick of it, tending to the wounded while providing insight and improvisation alongside Lasara. Her leadership was extraordinary, blending intuition with newfound humanity. Each command she gave, each decision, was a lesson in balance between power and compassion, dominance and restraint. In the aftermath, the remnants of the coalition were scattered, fleeing across the void. Lasara and Elias stood together aboard her flagship, watching the stars streak past. The silence between them was profound, yet comfortable. You've done the impossible, Elias said finally. No, she replied softly. We have done it. Together. He smiled, feeling a rare sense of peace. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. I would not be queen without you, she said. Nor would I want to be, he said, meeting her gaze. The twin moons of the system glimmered through the viewport, casting light upon them that seemed to promise new beginnings. Her empire now stabilized. Lasara began to focus on reform, not conquest. Elias traveled with her, advising on diplomacy, infrastructure, and defense, while also witnessing the growth of a civilization reborn from the ashes of war. The human had become integral, a silent partner to a queen whose power was now tempered with empathy and understanding. The bond forged in the heat of battle and the quiet of recovery had transformed them both. One from wounded warrior to empathetic ruler, the other from reluctant healer to indispensable guide. When the first celebrations erupted across the systems, festivals of liberation, parades honoring the reclaimed planets, Elias stood beside her. The people cheered, Soldiers saluted, and for the first time, the queen allowed herself to smile fully, freely. She turned to him, eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 fires. "You've changed more than my empire," she said. "You've changed me." "You've always been extraordinary," he replied. "I just helped you see it differently." She laughed softly, a sound that carried hope and promise. For the first time in decades, Lysara's reign was not defined by fear or perfection, but by respect and adaptability. And Elias, who had entered her world as a simple human, found his own place among the stars, not as a conqueror, not as a subject, but as a companion, a guide, and perhaps something more. The galaxy had witnessed the fusion of human resilience and alien might, and in that fusion lay the promise of a new era. An era defined not by domination, but by the enduring strength of those who chose mercy over fear, action over apathy, and trust over suspicion. The aftermath of victory was tenuous. Lysara's empire stretched across a dozen star systems, each one scarred differently by war, rebellion, and neglect. Elias walked beside her on the observation deck of her flagship, the light from distant stars reflecting off her armor, silvered with the dust of battle. The hum of the engines was steady, a reminder of constant movement. "We can't rest," she said quietly. "Not yet. The coalition may be broken, but the galaxy doesn't forgive weakness." He nodded. "I know. And you're not weak." She glanced at him, golden eyes softening briefly before hardening again. "It is not weakness I fear, it is complacency." They began the arduous task of reconstruction. Systems previously loyal to the Pure Legion had to be pacified, their leaders retrained or replaced. Elias helped coordinate aid and rebuild infrastructure, while Lysara personally oversaw strategic deployments. He marveled at her attention to detail, the way she considered the long-term consequences of every decision, the subtle diplomacy she employed to sway local leaders without overt coercion. "You're more patient than I expected," he said once as they inspected a rebuilding orbital station. She tilted her head. "Patience is survival. Impatience leads to ruin." "Good to know," he replied, scribbling notes in his datapad. "I should probably start listening more." Not all territories welcomed her reform. On one frontier world, insurgents had barricaded themselves in an abandoned city, defying her authority openly. Lysara studied the map with Elias, her fingers tracing the locations of enemy positions. "I could obliterate them," she said quietly. Elias frowned. "And lose what? Civilians? Resources? Loyalty? Perhaps," she admitted. "Or perhaps mercy will turn the tide in our favor." He leaned back. "Mercy, huh? That's new for you." She smiled faintly. "I learned it from someone small, stubborn, and surprisingly infuriating." He smirked. "You mean me." The campaign to reclaim the city tested both of them. Elias coordinated sabotage operations, cutting supply lines and disabling defensive systems. Lysara led her elite forces in precision strikes, choosing targets carefully, minimizing casualties, and ensuring that fear did not define her return. The insurgents expected her wrath, but instead encountered discipline, strategy, and a patience that frustrated them. Elias watched her from a command post, amazed at how she balanced authority with subtle compassion. It was a lesson in leadership that no book or manual could teach. Evenings were spent tending to the wounded. Elias moved from infirmary to infirmary, his hands steady, his touch deliberate. Lysara accompanied him, her gaze focused, yet her posture less rigid than in battle. He noted the change, how she allowed vulnerability in small doses, how she listened to the suffering of those around her, and how she permitted herself to be human without fearing it. "Do you ever regret listening to me?" he asked one night as they patched a soldier's wound together. She paused, considering. "No," she said finally. "I have learned that understanding others does not diminish power. It enhances it." The front lines began to stabilize, but threats remained. A fleet of mercenary warships approached, intent on exploiting the still recovering empire. Lysara assembled a council with Elias by her side, devising strategies that relied on precision rather than overwhelming force. He marveled at her ability to anticipate enemy movements, adapt tactics on the fly, and yet still preserve life where possible. "You've mastered something remarkable," he said quietly. "Not just war," she replied. "Balance." One day, while inspecting a newly liberated planet, Elias noticed Lasara pause near a memorial for the fallen. Her hands traced the names etched in stone, her face reflective. "Every life matters," she whispered. "Even theirs." He stepped closer. "Even the ones who fought against you?" She met his gaze, her eyes unflinching. "Especially them." Without understanding, how can a ruler ever truly command? He nodded slowly, realizing that her vision of leadership had evolved beyond conquest. It was rooted in empathy and foresight. The human element became increasingly important. Elias taught her negotiation tactics, how to navigate cultural differences, and how to employ diplomacy alongside military might. They traveled together from system to system, facing challenges that tested patience, ingenuity, and moral judgment. With each encounter, Lasara grew more confident in wielding power responsibly. Her soldiers adapted, civilians trusted her, and the galaxy began to recognize that the Queen of the Nine Thrones was no longer defined solely by fear. Yet change brought new complexities. Within her own ranks, whispers of dissent emerged. Those loyal to the old ways feared her leniency, worried that her growing empathy weakened her authority. Elias watched the council meetings with quiet concern, noting the subtle tension in the room. "You can't win them all," he said once. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "No," she admitted, "but I can show them a different path. One that does not require blood to command loyalty." Late nights found them alone in the war room, planning campaigns, discussing reforms, and quietly sharing thoughts. Elias observed her as she traced star maps, her mind calculating probabilities and outcomes, yet allowing space for intuition and emotion. "You've changed," he said softly. She paused, glancing at him. "And yet I am still me," she replied. "I have learned to temper strength with compassion, strategy with patience." He smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the galaxy is learning too." The culmination of these reforms came when an alliance of planets previously loyal to the Pure Legion demanded an audience. Lasara and Elias traveled to the central system, negotiating terms that would integrate these worlds peacefully. Elias marveled at her approach, how she listened carefully, allowed concerns to be voiced, and offered solutions that balanced justice and pragmatism. The alien queen, once feared across galaxies, now inspired respect and hope, not terror. During a private moment on the flagship, Elias watched her walk along the observation deck. Her armor reflected starlight, but it was her posture, relaxed and thoughtful, that caught his attention. "You've come far," he said. "Further than I imagined." She turned, eyes meeting his, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "And you have guided me farther than any teacher or advisor ever could." "We make a good team," he said softly. "Indeed," she replied, her gaze lingering. The final threat arrived unexpectedly. An ancient weapon hidden within a neutral system, capable of destabilizing entire star clusters. Lasara's forces moved to neutralize it, but she insisted on precision, refusing to risk collateral damage. Elias assisted, coordinating the human crews who understood technology she had never commanded. Together, they devised a plan that disarmed the weapon without loss of life. The mission's success solidified her reputation, proving that mercy and strategy could coexist, and that leadership need not be ruthless to be effective. The empire stabilized under her guidance. Civilizations once oppressed now flourished, trade routes reopened, and new alliances formed. Elias traveled with her as both advisor and companion, witnessing a galaxy transformed by the union of human ingenuity and alien might. Lasara, once feared as a tyrant, now ruled with wisdom tempered by experience and compassion. And amidst the political and military duties, a bond deepened, one forged through trust, shared hardship, and mutual respect. One quiet evening, atop a cliff on a newly liberated world, Elias and Lasara watched the twin suns set. The sky was streaked with vibrant colors, reflecting off the oceans and sands below. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" he asked. She glanced at him. "I do. But then I look around, and I see what we've accomplished together. I cannot imagine another path." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've changed more than the galaxy," he said. "You've changed me too." She looked at him, her golden eyes softening, and for the first time, allowed herself to be completely unguarded. The stars shimmered above, uncountable and vast. For Elias, it was a moment of peace in a life defined by chaos and conflict. For Lasara, it was a testament to the power of trust, compassion, and guidance. The bridge between human and alien, leader and companion. They stood together in silence, letting the magnitude of their achievements sink in. Somewhere in the distance, a fleet carried messages of peace, trade, and rebuilding. The galaxy, scarred but resilient, looked toward a future shaped not by fear, but by understanding and collaboration. As night fell, Elias knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would arise, old enemies would resurface, and the weight of empire would press down relentlessly. Yet, he also knew that together, they were capable of facing any storm. He looked at her, seeing the same determination, strength, and now tempered empathy that had carried them through countless battles. "Ready for the next challenge?" he asked softly. She smiled, her armor glinting in the starlight. Always. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous, but it was also alive. And for the first time, Elias realized that their bond, the human and the alien queen, was more than survival, more than duty. It was a promise to protect, to guide, and to endure. As they prepared to chart new courses, explore distant worlds, and rebuild shattered civilizations, he knew that the lessons learned, the battles fought, and the lives saved were only the beginning of a story that would span the stars. The stars above the rebuilt systems of the Salenthi Dominion shimmered like scattered diamonds, reflecting the calm that followed years of war, rebellion, and reconstruction. Elias Ward walked alongside Lasara through the central plaza of the capital world, the twin suns low on the horizon casting long amber shadows across the crystalline streets. Once a battlefield, the city now thrummed with life. Merchants called across vibrant markets, children chased one another through the glowing canals, and soldiers trained not as conquerors, but as protectors. Elias inhaled the warm, electric air, sensing the pulse of the people beneath his feet. Lasara's influence was everywhere, yet she moved quietly among her citizens, her presence commanding respect without fear. He glanced at her as she paused to aid a young civilian whose hoverboard had crashed into a glowing energy conduit. Lasara bent gracefully, her hands gentle as she helped the child upright. The armor she wore shimmered faintly, infused with the light of the twin suns, yet she exuded no intimidation. Her gaze met Elias's, and in it he saw something profound. The transformation of a ruler who had once ruled through terror into one who now inspired through example. He marveled at the humanity she had learned to embrace, a quality once alien to her empire, now the cornerstone of her leadership. "You've changed everything," he said softly. She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "No," she replied. "We've changed everything." Her voice carried the weight of experience. The depth of battle survived, and the courage to rewrite centuries of tradition. Elias felt a quiet swell of pride. In his hands, her wounds had healed, but in his presence, she had healed the cracks within herself and, indirectly, the fractures of an entire civilization. The lesson of empathy, resilience, and human ingenuity had taken root in the heart of the galaxy's most feared army. "And what now?" he asked. "Now we make sure they never forget what it means to be alive," she said. They walked past the palace gates, where banners of gold and silver fluttered above the plaza. Citizens greeted the queen freely, bowing only to offer respect rather than fear. Soldiers, once rigid in perfect formations, now marched with measured freedom, their discipline guided by trust rather than coercion. Elias noted the subtle shifts in behavior, The way civilians interacted with authority, the careful balance of freedom and responsibility instilled by Lysara's guidance. The changes weren't instantaneous. Rebellion simmered in distant systems, but a framework had been laid. A blend of order and choice that made the Dominion resilient and alive. The night descended, painting the city in soft violet and cobalt. Yet the twin moons reflected across the crystalline towers, illuminating Lysara's path as she led Elias to the observation deck of her palace. The wind carried the scent of molten glass and blooming flora, an unexpected consequence of the reconstructed urban ecology. Elias leaned against the railing, watching the light refract across the city's canals, casting rainbow hues across bustling streets below. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said, his voice barely above the wind. The queen walking among her people as one of them. She stood beside him, her gaze on the horizon. "And yet, it was the human who reminded me what life truly is," she said softly. "Not the empire, not the fleet, but the choices we make and the bonds we honor." Her eyes met his, golden irises reflecting the moon's light. For a moment, the past battles, the scars, the fear, all seemed to converge into a single truth. Elias had not only saved her life physically, but had reshaped her empire emotionally. He swallowed hard. "You make it sound simple," he said. "It's not," she replied. "Leadership, like humanity, is never simple, but it is worth every risk." He placed a hand on the railing beside hers, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her armor, from the pulse of life she carried. "I guess that's why it works," he said quietly. "Because it's human." They spent the next cycle navigating a gala of peacekeepers, diplomats, and citizens celebrating the restoration of order. Elias observed Lysara as she spoke to governors, traders, and scholars, her charisma tempered now by humility. She laughed freely, nodded thoughtfully, and commanded attention without coercion. Elias realized that the transformation was not limited to her people. The galaxy itself would remember her reign as a time when fear was replaced with guidance, strength with compassion, and war with opportunity. Every gesture, every word, reverberated with lessons drawn from human resilience, ingenuity, and empathy. Later, Elias and Lysara returned to the palace balcony, overlooking the city. The twin suns set slowly, casting long shadows across the spires. Below, the citizens moved with confidence, no longer bound by fear, yet bound by trust. Elias turned to her. "Do you ever miss the old way?" he asked softly. "The fear, the certainty, the perfection?" She shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "Fear is a tool, not a foundation. Perfection is an illusion. True strength comes from understanding the fragility of life, the weight of choices, and the courage to bear them." He nodded, understanding the depth of her transformation. A soft wind carried the voices of children playing across the plaza below. Elias watched, thinking of the countless systems restored, the battles fought, and the lives saved. "You've built something lasting," he said. "Not just an empire, but hope." She looked at him, eyes softened with gratitude. "And you've taught me that power without understanding is meaningless," she said. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Elias smiled faintly. "You don't owe me. You just had to let someone remind you how to be alive." The following days were quieter, spent coordinating final reforms, securing trade, and nurturing alliances. Elias continued to act as advisor and friend, walking beside her as she made public addresses, guided new leaders, and ensured that her influence was constructive rather than oppressive. Her demeanor remained regal, yet approachable, blending authority with warmth, a reflection of the lessons learned alongside a human who refused to bow to fear. Slowly, stories spread across the galaxy. A human had healed the queen, and in doing so, had changed the fate of countless stars. One evening, Elias found himself alone with her atop a hill overlooking a restored city. The moons hung low, twin silver arcs casting reflective light across the sands. Lysara stood in silent contemplation, her posture regal yet relaxed, the faint glow of her veins dimmed but still visible beneath the armor. Elias stepped closer. Do you ever wonder if you could have done it without me? He asked softly. She turned to him, gaze steady. Perhaps, she said. But it would not have been the same. You showed me what humanity could teach an empire, and what it could teach a queen. He nodded, overwhelmed with pride and quiet awe. They watched the twin moons rise fully, illuminating the city in serene silver and gold. Elias realized that the galaxy had shifted permanently. Not through conquest, but through patience, ingenuity, and compassion. Lasara's people thrived, and she had embraced her humanity without relinquishing her authority. The lessons learned together would ripple across the stars for generations. It's quiet now, he murmured. Too quiet. She smiled faintly. Quiet is peace. We earned it. The final challenge came not from war, but from diplomacy. A neighboring coalition sought an audience to formalize peace treaties and trade agreements. Lasara's approach was meticulous. Elias observed, noting how she balanced assertiveness with empathy, authority with approachability. Her decisions were now informed by human reasoning as much as alien strategy, a fusion that made her nearly invincible. The coalition departed satisfied, alliances strengthened, and the dominion stabilized. For Elias, it was a testament to what a single human life could influence. A galaxy-wide chain reaction of understanding, trust, and reform. At night, atop the palace balcony, Elias and Lasara looked out over the stars. Do you ever regret listening to me? He asked softly. Not for a moment, she replied. You taught me the value of restraint, trust, and the worth of individual life. Lessons that cannot be learned in battle alone. He smiled faintly. I'm glad I could help. She glanced at him, expression unreadable for a heartbeat, then softened. You did more than help. You changed everything. The twin suns began to rise once more, casting warm light across the restored city. Citizens moved freely, soldiers trained openly, and children played in streets that had once echoed with the sounds of conflict. Elias realized that he was no longer just a healer or a human witness to alien power. He had become part of a legacy. Lasara's empire was strong not because of fear or perfection, but because a human had reminded a queen of empathy, resilience, and the power of imperfection. She stood beside him silently, their shadows stretching across the balcony. What now? He asked. Now, she said, her eyes reflecting the dawn. We ensure that this peace endures, that life, choice, and understanding thrive where fear once ruled. He nodded, the weight of countless battles and lessons settling in. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous. But with compassion, ingenuity, and courage, it could flourish. He looked at Lasara and saw not just a queen, but a force reshaped by humanity, ready to lead her people into a new era. As the twin suns bathed the city in golden light, Elias realized something profound. One human had touched a life greater than any battlefield, and in doing so, had altered the course of history. Lasara's reign would be remembered not for domination, but for wisdom tempered with empathy, a testament to the enduring impact of humanity. They stood together, silent, watching the city awaken fully, the weight of survival, leadership, and understanding balanced delicately between them. And in that quiet moment, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging that hope, compassion, and human ingenuity could reshape even the deadliest of empires. Elias breathed deeply, feeling the warmth of life pulsing through the streets below, the pulse of a queen reborn, and the knowledge that their story, while ending one chapter, was only beginning another. Together they had rewritten the stars.